And we are live. This is the Council Google Plus. The council is now in session. This is John Wilkinson, broadcasting from the nether regions of Washington State, FEMA Region 10. This is Gitmo Nation Microsoft over here. Anyway, we got a full group here tonight. We got from the council, we have Brian Forbes. We got Calvinist Klein, also known as Josh Smith. We have Chris Harris. We have Joshua Gwynn and Vincent Lasson.
Welcome.
And we also have Matt Slick and a couple of other stragglers coming in here. We got General Han Solo along with Thaddeus.
What's good, people? What's good?
It's all good. That's right. So first of all, I want to say congratulations to Calvinist Klein, Josh Smith, for his graduating from college.
Thank you.
And that is amazing, man. What a feat.
Thank
I wouldn't
you.
have thought you could do
Now
that.
you're going to be dead for the rest of your life.
Now, hold on.
I mean, that is shocking. A girl and he graduated from college.
Hold on. Be honest with us. Have you actually graduated yet?
Yeah, well, I walked the stage, and all the grades for last semester are not posted yet. So, yeah, but
may not have actually graduated.
I don't know. No, let me say this. In my hardest class, in my probabilities class, engineering probability, did very well in that class, and that was the only class I was worried
What are the
about.
odds you think of you passing that?
Math, probability, and statistics was my hardest.
Yeah. What'd you say, Matt?
So what are the odds of you passing that class?
Oh, well, yeah, not good for not just for me, but for everybody. That's yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
All kidding aside, congratulations, man.
God willing, those other two classes are gonna come back good, so I don't have to go back and take summer classes.
Hopefully.
Yeah. But thank you guys. Thank you guys for that.
Very good for you, man.
Okay, I believe we're going to have like an open topic tonight. I don't think there's anything exactly scheduled to talk about.
I got a question.
Okay, here we go.
Does anybody live in Durham, North Carolina area, Raleigh, North Carolina, or Winston-Salem, North Carolina, or High Point, don't know where that is, or Gastonia, or Charlotte, or Des Moines, or Richmond, Virginia?
Wait, Des Moines, Iowa?
Yeah.
Des Moines, Iowa.
You do?
Yeah, I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
You know what 99.3 FM is?
Sort of.
Oh,
It's probably the Christian station there in town. But I'm 2 hours from Des Moines.
Starting on Tuesday next week, not in 2 days, I'll be on 11 more radio stations. And those are the list of them.
Very nice.
That's right. Yeah, congratulations, man. I saw
That's
that,
great.
or I heard that on your you mentioned that on your radio show.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's excellent.
I go to slap on a face
Now, who are you
to
syndicated to?
Truth Network.
Truth Network.
And,
Okay.
it'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So,
Okay.
but anyway, just, cool.
Yeah, what a like ironic name for Matt, for network name for Matt to be on.
Oh, you're trying to insult me.
Wow.
Let me help you out. There's a better way to insult me. You see, when Nathan and I were out there in D.C., we were in the subway, which you didn't help us with. But when we were at the subway, trying to figure out how to get the tickets to go to the right direction on the subway, we were equivalent to two monkeys trying to figure out a laptop. Okay? So you can mock me that way because, yeah, we're banging on it, throwing things at it. We didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, that is true.
You're not as good you are definitely not as good at insulting people as I am.
Yeah, I don't have as much practice, I don't have as much practice being insulted as you do. So Matt has the experience of being insulted, so he uses that.
That's not bad, but I have the advantage because there's so much more to work with in your case.
That's what happens when you give out personal details over the internet.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it.
So where's your hun? Where is she?
She came down for my graduation, and her and her family, and so she's back going home. Whoa. Never seen you open. I've never seen anybody open Clementine like that. Or is that orange?
These are Tangelos. Let me tell you, these are so stinking juicy and sweet. Oh man, I'm telling you, it's almost sinful. Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, almost. It's almost. Hold on a sec.
Was that what Eve took?
Oh wow, it's amazing.
We may have to edit this out.
Yeah, we
This
might.
is so good.
Or give commentary like this is what Matt's talking about.
Yeah.
Some great food
We're
from
gonna
his
have to have an
wife.
explicit tag for this.
That's okay. People can make some good sound bites out of that.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
And your first bite, it just explodes with this delicious, full.
Cooking with Matt Slick.
Eating oranges
We
is
got a
not
new
slick.
spin-off show here.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, guys, what do you want to talk about?
No. Oh, the cooking show's gone? Come on now.
Yeah,
That
I
is
couldn't cook. My wife's a good cook, but I suck, man. I can't cook.
I can grill.
I got a cell phone. I can order Domino's.
There you go. That's how I do it.
Got a topic if well, Matt, do you have a topic? You said.
Yeah.
You say okay.
If you got a topic, bring it up, man.
I don't know if you and this. I know this is ad nauseum, like just that keeps coming up at Facebook and everywhere. But I don't know if you guys saw the Leighton Flowers' last video. Does the Westminster Confession really explain anything? And I was supposed to make a response video. I didn't get around to it because there's a lot to do. I still need to do it. Maybe tonight. But I was talking to some individuals in the comment section of that, and one thing that Leighton will not do is he doesn't address the source material, the traditional Reformed documents like the three forms of unity, like the Heidelberg Catechism, Belgic Confessions, and I was about to say Councils of Trent or Canons of Trent. I mean the Canons of Dort, and also the Westminster Standard. But he said he kind of, and this is my impression, he kind of doesn't have the. Yeah, we're gonna have him on here, but he does. And Brian said, "Yeah." So I'm saying all this, and Brian said that, and I'm like, "Yeah, he's." But I'd like to talk to him about
His
this.
ears are burning probably right now.
Yeah, but it's my impression that he doesn't care to address those things because he already quotes from prominent Calvinists, and I was so misunderstood when I was talking about this in on his video. But what Brian meant when he talked to Leighton, and what I meant when I talked to him about this issue is that if you're going to hold Calvinists, I'll say if you're going to hold Reformed Christians to a standard, you need to hold them to their confessions and the traditional Reformed documents. You need to do that because you can't just say, okay, this Calvinist over here said this, so I'm going to hold you accountable for that. And you're not providing any context. I got to read the whole book to find out what you're actually, or the point he's actually making. So that was just my point. Is just you have to take them to the source material. That's so critical. And I got I just got a whole bunch of flack for that. Everybody was like, "Oh, you're not making a point. Like you're just claiming misrepresentation and stuff." I'm like, I don't read a lot of John Piper. You know, I don't read. So you bring something up about John Piper, a point about him. I don't know how to. I don't know the context of the quote. You're gonna have to go to.
Well, the other thing is like I like John Piper, but he's not confessionally reformed, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's another point because
he's kind of like John McCarthy, he's Calvinist.
Right. Right.
Confessional. Right.
Right. And so that's the thing because we have and Leighton says this and he says, okay, well, neo. He says he's about the young, restless, and reformed because you have this group of Christians they're Calvinists, you know, they claim 5 points and stuff like that, but they're not reformed. They're not confessionally reformed. And so those are like the neo-Calvinist groups, and there's some books I think written in sites about neo-Calvinism and stuff like that, but they're not going to have the same, I guess, reasons for believing what they do. They're not going to. For us, we're going to look at you like crazy if you show me a picture of like John Piper, show me a quote. And I'm like, I don't know where that came from, but I don't know why that's relevant to me. I don't know why you're asking me about that. And you know, but anyways, but I just wanted to talk about like the role of confessions and creeds in Christianity, because I feel like a lot of people, the church I grew up in, they would say things like that there's just a non-denominational type of self-righteousness that they're like, okay, we don't have the traditions of men. We don't have any traditions because we're non-denominational.
No creed but Christ. Or no
yeah,
creed
no,
but the Bible. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and they're like, oh, we just believe the Bible.
Too.
And that's like, that's absurd, because it's like, if this is the way I put it, it's just, if you ask me what I believe, I'll point to the confession. You ask me why I believe it, I'll point to the Bible or specific passages in the scriptures. But like, it's just it's a summary of, it's a reflection. It's not replacing scripture. In the London Baptist Confession of Faith, the second, the 1689 says this, and so does the Westminster. I think in the very first chapter. This is not new information. So I just don't understand. And the thing that really annoys me, and I'm sorry I'm on the diatribe, I'll give it up in a sec so other people can talk. But the thing that really annoys me is the unwillingness to look into those things. Like, people don't even care, people that are engaging with Reformed theology. But if you want to engage it properly and historically, not talking like someone who added like a 6 point of Calvinism or something, like a 6 point or something like that. Like, historically, you got to go to the traditional Reformed documents, and you have to deal with it there. Then you've dealt with the root of Reformed theology when you've addressed those things. So, and also, even if you went to John Calvin for quotes like, the confessions were godly men coming together to articulate points of doctrine. And so it's not just like one person's comments when he wrote, things like that. And they took years to do this. And also, people don't account for things like John Calvin over the years, just like John Owen. There's development in theology. People forget this, but when we read, for example, like the Church Fathers, there's a development over time in their theology. It's not like they didn't come out of the womb and write their first word on paper with the exact same theology they had when they died. These things like come, certain points of doctrine are fine-tuned because of controversy, and they have to go to the scriptures and say, okay, what do the scriptures teach on this issue? And they change their position, or alter their position, refine their position rather, as a result of these controversies. So
yeah, it's like how personality of someone isn't set in stone. It depends on what they've experienced in their lives, and their personal views will change on that.
Exactly.
So trying to say that somebody is going to stay exactly the same, that's kind of a mistake. You're not even understanding how humans work at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's
like
why
saying that. Like if you quote Martin Luther in a certain year and then quote him in another year, and he's saying, his views change throughout.
Oh yeah,
history.
right.
So,
And I'll just say this anyways. I've read that Martin Luther's doctrine on, like he believed that infant baptism, that infants could be granted faith in the sacrament of baptism, which I'm pretty sure I read that he took that away, but Lutherans still hold it. Because Melanchthon, I guess, still held it or whatever. But there's clear development in his theology, and when you allow for that, you can track that. But if you hold him to a standard of, he said this once, and he just, for example, like, he took out the book of James or something like that, even though in later editions he explicitly, like, he changed that. Yeah, he revised that, I should say.
Justin pointed this out about a month ago, maybe it was 2, where we were talking about lordship salvation and talking about John MacArthur. I mean, even in 20 years, John MacArthur wrote, what's the book I'm thinking of, Joshua? He wrote the book, and then he's since taken a step back from that.
Yeah, the gospel according to Jesus.
Yeah, there's something in there that
yeah.
he's, I don't know if you'd say recanted, but I mean, he's taking a softer step.
I mean, you could say that.
Okay.
Yeah, with his talks with Michael Horton and others.
Yeah, and so there's this development over time of authors, and so I see this a lot when I talk with non-believers, atheists. It's very easy to quote somebody out of context.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of guilty of doing that sometimes.
I mean, if I were to do it right, I'm pretty sure that I could, make somebody like Christopher Hitchens, or I could pull a quote out of a Hitchens book or out of a Dawkins book that says, "I believe in God." If I cut it up just right, and so if I did that, people would be up in arms. Well, you can't do that. That's out of context. Well, it's the same with the Bible. It's the same way with some of these theologians that have volumes of work that you have to take as a whole rather than as just sound bites.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of applies to everything, though. That's a big communication error just on
and the
great debate.
Oh no, yeah, sorry. The thing that's great about the confessions, though, is that they are designed to be a quick summary of what we believe.
Right.
It's a great reference. Then they've got the footnotes plus the references into the Bible, so you can get the larger context of where they derive this from. And especially like you look at the three forms and the Heidelberg. I don't subscribe to those, but those are very detailed documents, and they do give a summary. But at the same time, they're a good overview of what most Reformed believers believe.
Right.
Yeah. Even though there's differences in the different views in the Reformed camps. Well, I mean, obviously not every Presbyterian thinks Baptist or Reformed, but
right. That's annoying.
No, I'm kidding.
But a lot of the majority of them are the same, right? Where you get the London Baptist Confession, especially between that and the but the orthodoxy, a lot of it is the same. There are going to be some. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to say major, in your view, anyhow. Major distinctions. I think there are some important secondary, distinctions between Lutherans and Presbyterians and Baptists.
Oh, there's some major ones.
Yeah.
You can lose your salvation versus not lose your salvation,
Right.
And then they're a little bit closer in the sacraments to Roman Catholicism, and then there's ex opera operata. But the doing it's done, the sacramental system produces a certain event and a certain result. Those are issues. Communion issue. Things like that. They're closer to Catholicism than I would like.
Yeah. I haven't studied Lutheranism a whole lot, but yeah.
You went to Lutheran college.
Oh, that's yeah. I think they would reject the ex opera operato label.
I've heard it and seen it, but then you're right. Some would reject it, but some don't.
But functionally, like Luther in a lot of ways was more sacramental than Roman Catholics, because he believed that that faith was granted every time, but so that's why I think that's how they get it. Might be how they get around it, because for Roman Catholics, it's like it doesn't have to grant faith, but they're regenerate, I guess, or original sin is cleared away regardless of faith, and there's no relation to faith. It's just apart from by the doing done, so it's there's no, but they do affirm justification by faith alone, and the sacraments do not grant justification. Baptism does not grant justification, and so that's why Lutherans are brothers. I
would consider them too. Brothers,
and that's something I think when a lot of people hear baptismal regeneration, they get like a little weirded out by that, and I guess evangelicals do, but American evangelicals, but that they are not saying that justification is granted in the sacraments, and they so. But
it's interesting because Lutherans use terms that we use, but they use them different.
Right.
So sometimes when they speak of baptism, they mean the baptism that we receive from God. And sometimes when they're talking about baptism, they're talking about the physical baptism. And sometimes they're talking about both at the same time. And so, like, they have a very different view of baptism than what a Baptist would have or what a non-denominational Christian would have, right? If you get a chance, I would recommend listening to Jason Mullet's conversation with Bruce Zitlow. I thought it was really interesting because it's a Reformed guy and a Lutheran guy talking, and there was a lot of, okay, wait, hold on, you said that, but what do you mean by what do you mean by that? It was, and I thought it was a really cordial and well done conversation between the two, especially given the contentiousness on the Bible thumping ring that page that sparked it.
Ain't that how a lot of these conversations go? It's like, you said that, but what do you mean?
Oh, right.
It's like you said words. That's what I know. But sometimes it can be hard to understand.
Right.
Yeah, I want to watch that.
I thought that was a really good conversation. And like, I listen to Chris Roseborough a lot, and I've learned so much from him just about properly dividing law and gospel. I think that's something.
Who's that?
Chris Roseborough from Pirate Christian. That's something that I think Lutherans get right, is that they get that distinction. They get the tension between law and gospel. They get the tension between law and gospel. They get that without the law, the gospel isn't sweet, but without, and then without the gospel, the law is overpowering, and so there's this nice tension that they have, that they kind of understand from their confession to the Book of Concord.
Have you seen on Carm? There's I wrote it years ago, an article dealing with law and gospel, and it was heavily influenced out of some of the stuff from Lutheran positions. And I liked what a lot of it had to say.
I would love to see that. Yeah, they have an interesting. Can you post that in the side chat? I would love to see that.
See if I can find that.
One thing before anybody jumps on this from the outside, any Lutherans watching, or any Roman Catholics watching, Roman Catholics do say that justification isn't baptism. Roman Catholics do, Lutherans do not. So that's a
Gotta put that little disclaimer out there. You don't want hate comments.
Right. I don't want anybody to claim. I don't want any
Well,
people to
it's
think
true.
I'm trying to
I mean that's good, Josh. That's a huge distinction.
It is. That's a gospel violation versus non-gospel violation right there. So that's that. Saying that anything other than faith is an instrument that brings about justification is an instrumental cause of justification that's a denial of the gospel. So it's because we can stand with like Lutherans and Anglicans and even high church Anglicans and say that faith is the sole instrument of justification. Period. There's no additions. There's nothing else. So that's what Paul was saying in Galatians as well. For those who are trying to be justified by law, severed from Christ, fallen from grace.
Yeah, man.
So. Oh, thank you, man. I see this. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple links.
They do have I got to read some more on the Lutheran and Reformed distinctions between law and gospel. But
I do too. I mean, I've read some on Lutheranism, but in Schreiner's book on the Five Solas series, he gets into that a little bit on the distinction between Calvin and Luther and how they look at faith and law and gospel. I mean, it's not a treatise by any means, but it does give you a little bit of of a look at the distinctions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But as far as justification and whatnot, yeah, definitely. There are some, pretty much, full agreement there. I would say when it comes to assurance, that's where you start to see the big disagreements.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Matt? That would be,
Yes.
you see a lot of the disagreements, assurance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
to me, that's huge because I mean, right?
It is.
Practically, experientially, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
It is like, but the thing is that they don't hold to that consistently. I don't think anybody that believes you can lose your salvation actually holds to that consistently. Well, except for unless you're like a full out like semi or full on Pelagian. Like I don't think you'd hold to that consistently. I just wanted to read one thing and we can come back, but just to illustrate I had to pull it up. Development in Luther's theology, and also a refutation of the Epistle of Straw claims from mostly Roman Catholics. But so this is from Alpha and Omega Ministries on 6 points on Luther's Epistle of Straw, and this is one of the points. It says, first, this quote, Epistle of Straw, only appears in Luther's original 1522 preface of the New Testament. After 1522, all the editions of Luther's Bible dropped the Epistle of Straw comment, along with the entire paragraph that placed value judgments on particular biblical books. It was Luther himself who edited these comments out. For anyone to continue to cite Luther's Epistle of Straw comments against him is to do him an injustice. He saw it fit to retract the comment. Subsequent citations of this quote should bear this in mind. And so that's both, both shows like this, a refining of theology, or refining of views based on God's truth, and also that also specifically to that objection to Luther mostly from Roman Catholics that say that like you can't just pick and choose from a person's life. You have to treat them fairly, and that they had developments over a time span. Not to say that they didn't have good stuff to say earlier on in their lives, but you're gonna, especially like people like John Owen, when he became, he matured in his like exegetical methodology, like he was already amazing, but he just continued to grow and continue to get better. I wouldn't want to be judged. I don't think any of us would want to be judged for what we said when we first became Christians and like the statements we made like that. Can you imagine? Like I wouldn't want to.
No.
Yeah. But the sacramental topic as well.
Why is everyone so quiet?
Because I'm being bad and hogging all the airtime.
Josh is informing us. He's teaching us. It's awesome.
This is the first time I've ever heard Josh.
Han, do you not hear CK?
It took a long time for it to make sense, but he's doing it.
Usually Josh
Well said, man. That was great.
Usually Josh just sits in the background and he's like, "Oh,
I'm just wondering if my internet's lagging. I'll just refresh."
Yes, please do.
This will be interesting.
Yeah, keep going, CK. Sorry.
Well, no.
See, this is what I'm used to.
Sacraments. What did you say, Brian?
I said, this is what I'm used to. Is that, oh, no, it's okay.
Well, we went into the sacraments a little bit. And I would really, because the last few months, I've been wanting to refine my understanding and views on the sacraments biblically. And so and this kind of flows right from what we're already talking about. But what are your guys' views about, I guess, the Reformed view of the sacraments? Like, what are you guys? That's a really broad question, but what, like, because if you read things like John Calvin in his comments on baptismal efficacy, it's like just the way he speaks of it. It like if you read one quote, it would sound like baptismal regeneration, and you read another quote, and it sounds like he's refuting baptismal regeneration. But then you read in things like his commentary on 1 Peter 3, he makes the distinctions very clearly, and he lays out both. He lays out his position, and it's called, what is it? It's a duplex loquendi modus, which is Latin for a twofold way of speaking, twofold manner of speaking.
What is the difference between sacraments and ordinances then? in your view?
And real quick, let's define what the sacraments are.
Yes. You mean like what is a sacrament? What is it?
Well, no, but I mean, what's a sacrament? What do we consider the sacraments? What's the difference between ordinances?
Yeah, I mean,
because I mean, I'm sure there's some people that might be listening that have no clue what any of that is.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Let me pull up. I have Louis Burkhoff's systematic theology here. If I could find.
Well, he's not a Baptist, so I'm kidding.
He's not. But we don't. In our confession doesn't have. Our confession doesn't have the word sacrament, so I wanted to let him.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of people don't like it. Like, some Baptists use it, some don't. But it's basically sacrament is it's Latin for mysteries, or sacramentum I think was Latin for mysteries. But sacrament is basically those things instituted by Christ for his church. And we call them ordinances. And Brian, you might be able to give more information about why. I guess why that is. I know a little bit about it, but I don't know much at all about why that's offensive. For example, like Dr. White doesn't like to use the word sacrament for himself because it's used by Roman Catholics, but it's certainly like historically in Christianity, it's been used in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think it is. I would say, not in Dr. White's case, but in kind of that time frame when they switched from saying sacraments to ordinances, it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to Rome.
Right.
But at the same time, the Roman sacramental system is different than a Presbyterian, Westminster, Three Forms sacramental system, right? So there is a difference, and so I get why some people wouldn't want to be associated with the common idea of what people think of when you say sacrament.
Yeah.
Hey, so what is your view, man? We hadn't heard from you a little bit because CK doesn't stop talking when he's talking.
I know. He's out of school and he thinks he's smart.
Okay.
I was honestly thinking, man,
the
dude, I'm
CK show.
some more. Man, he's doing research. I'm learning from him. Man,
he is good.
That's all right.
When he's right, he's good.
I think maybe I was trying to understand what his girlfriend sees in him. Maybe. I'm not sure, but
you shouldn't be too mad with him talking. I mean, isn't this not the CK show? Let me have to check the title of the YouTube video. Oh no, it's
all I can say is his personality makes up for a multitude of sins in his looks. So.
Thaddeus, I was kind of thinking the same thing. We gotta entitle it something. CK.
That's right.
Yeah, the CK.
CK is arrives on the scene.
It's the Council of
there
Crime.
you go.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
How do you feel about being the owner of the council, man?
I'm not. That's definitely. I would never take that from John. John is the Pope. Sorry, I shouldn't have said it. Now is out there. He's not really the Pope. He's the council king.
Jay has always been the Pope.
Yeah, Jay is the Pope. John is the council king.
I was too afraid to flex on camera. It's okay. You could have been the leader, but you passed on the title.
No. Well, I'd gladly do that. I don't.
All right, so back to sacraments /
What do you think? Since Matt leans Presbyterian, I was wondering what is his view on the sacrament versus ordinance view.
Well, to be honest, I'm a little confused on it because sacrament basically means a means of grace, and basically, so by the doing of something, there's an institution and a thing of grace upon you. And me, I'm a little more anal than most people are about defining things. So what does it mean? When I take communion, is grace bestowed? Well, now we got to define what it means by grace. Is grace Roman Catholic grace, which infused into us? Or is grace, which I would completely and totally reject, or is grace God looking more favorably upon us? But then, does that mean that in communion, God likes us better if we take communion? That wouldn't make sense because it violates the issue of sufficiency of the cross. And so, I just I can't do those. When I went to a Lutheran college and a Presbyterian seminary and sacraments came up, I was never able to get to the point where I was comfortable with saying what it is. But like for communion, people say, well, what happens during communion? And I say, I don't know. And what is communion? Well, I just say Jesus is there in communion the same way he was the first time. I just leave it at that, because I think we can get pretty much doctrinally nuanced to the point where we're going to start saying, well, now by taking communion, then God does this ABCD with you. I don't know if he does. I don't see anything that's saying that in the Old Testament. Those are covenant signs.
It's a lot deeper than grape juice and crackers.
Right. What's that?
Apparently. So apparently communion's a lot deeper than grape juice and crackers.
Yes. Yeah. There's something going on. Now, I don't like taking communion, and I don't like giving communion.
Well, that sucks.
No
grape juice and crackers for you.
Well, it's because I take it seriously. When I preached last at Calvary Chapel, believe it or not, it was a coincidence how things worked out. But I ended up preaching on Communion Sunday and gave communion. And I preached a sermon. I'll give you the short version. You'll see why I say what I'm saying. But I started with the intertrinitarian communion, the covenant of grace, spoken of in Hebrews 13:20. I didn't go all reformed out on them, but I talked about the intertrinitarian communion to redeem mankind. I left it at that. The promise made, and I did say the Father sent the Son because Jesus said the Father sent me. Okay, so I got in there and I said there are covenants. We have the covenant, rainbow covenant. We have circumcision covenant. We have different covenants, and I got down to the point of saying we're going to all participate in this sermon now. We're all going to participate. We're going to take a break. I'm going to ask all of you to get the elements and come back to your chair. Don't take them yet. And we're going to continue with the sermon, and you're all going to be involved with the sermon. And by the time we got to that point, I've been talking about covenant and what covenant signs mean. And that the communion, the bread and wine we hold in our hand, is that covenant sign that was started eternally long ago and was fulfilled on the cross that we participate. So it's an eternal covenant we hold in our hands as symbols of. And I said, so the sermon's not done, and we need to finish this. And so we all take communion together, and then we end the sermon. I wanted them to participate in the sermon. So anyway, having said all that, what is this sacrament, so to speak? Is it a means of grace? Are we affected by it? Yes, we are. There's an effect that occurs to us, within us, upon us, in taking communion. I'm humbled. I'm more guilty in that I'm aware of my sin more. Things happen. And so is that a form of grace upon us? I would say yes, in the sense that God is being gracious to us. I think somehow these sacraments, as we like to call them here in this context, enjoin us to a more gracious work of God upon us. That's what I think happens, but I don't even know what that really means. And that's as far as I've gotten. So when you ask me that question, it's a whole bunch of time to say, I don't know exactly.
Oh, can I read you guys from something from the London Baptist Confession of Faith on the this is on the Lord's Supper, and this is pretty mirrored pretty well. This is chapter 30 in Article 7. This is on the Lord's Supper. It says, worthy receivers outwardly partaking on the visible elements in this sacrament do then also inwardly by faith, really and indeed, yet not carnally and corporally, but spiritually, receive and feed upon Christ crucified and all the benefits of his death. The body and the blood of Christ being then not corporally or carnally in with or under the bread and wine, yet as really, but spiritually, present to the faith of the believers in that ordinance as the elements themselves are to their outward senses. So it's like,
is that the Westminster or the London?
Oh, that's the London Baptist Confession, and a lot of people will be impressed, yeah, because it's like they're like, wow, that sounds like really sacramental. It's like, yeah, that's because sacramental doesn't mean.
And how come they don't believe in infant baptism if they're going to go all the way?
Well, that's a confession, or that's a covenantal error. So we don't make that mistake.
Oh, yeah. It's on. Yeah. It is on.
Reformed fast with the Catholics.
You started out so well, CK, and he started to like.
Wait, how are you gonna? Just out the window. The other Baptists are gonna abandon me when Matt says, "Oh my goodness," they're like, "Oh, we're on your side, Matt. We just switched."
No, I'm sitting back just watching. I'm not taking a side.
Yeah, being fence sitter.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a tough subject. It's a good subject, though. And I've never been able to formulate what I think is a precise understanding. And I think it's just simply because the Bible doesn't tell us. I think we can look at the Old Testament types, like, for example, circumcision. What did it do? It represented the covenant of God. And I think there's a promissory commitment of God in it. And I think that's part of the sacramental issue, is that God, I don't know a better way to say this. In baptism, he looks more favorably upon you, but you're already redeemed in Christ. But there's a covenantal faithfulness issue that goes there. But is that accurate? It seems to be something like that. Just the way a child in a covenant with God, there's certain ramifications to that promise that's included.
Right. Right.
And it's not so easy.
It's like, for the means of grace, they're like communicating the benefits, and it's not like it's not like in a sense of like an ex operato or anything like that, but just by, like, when you partake of the Lord's Supper, you put your faith in Christ at that point, and then you're receiving spiritually what you're, it's like a in accordance with what you're eating spiritually, you're feeding on the body and blood of Christ, which we always do as believers. It's not a one-time thing. We're constantly going back, like John 6 talks about. And so it's kind of like that. And we receive those benefits that are already covenantally ours in Christ. And it's, not that we deserve them, of course, but that are already promised by grace,
Right.
But I think the one that really convinced me, the passage that really convinced me to start looking at the sacraments more closely, was Colossians 2:11 and 12, because that really, I couldn't find any type of way, when looking at baptismal passages, that was the only text that was there's no other way to possibly read this, and I had to reevaluate at that point.
Reevaluate what?
I had to reevaluate my
rethink his entire life. Sorry, go ahead.
I had more of a non-Reformed Baptist view on the sacraments, that these are just mere outward symbols and things like that. They're just things, that's all they are. And
so you're saying that Colossians 11 and 12, it deals with circumcision and baptism related issue. Circumcision made without hands, having been buried with him in baptism. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so when you read that, what did it do to you?
Well, when it says, in also verse 11, it says, "And in him you're also circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, in the removal of the body of flesh, by the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism, in which are also raised up with him through faith in the working of God who raised him from the dead." And the verb in verse 12 it's a temporal adverbial participle. So it happens at the same time as being circumcised, as that circumcision that's being talked about in verse 11. And I remember I learned this the hard way, because I had a debate with Tyler Vela, and he pointed this out to me, and I was
say that again.
What? It's, let me go. I can pull it up over here. It's in verse 11. Let me go to verse 11. Comes to 11. When it says in verse 11, it says, "And you were circumcised."
Right.
And you were also, circumcised with him. Circumcised with a circumcision made without hands. Sorry. And then verse 12, when it says, it's sunta gentes. That's an adverbial participle. It's a temporal adverbial participle that's it occurs at the same time as the word for circumcised in verse 11.
So what's happening at the same time? The two things in the English. What's happening at the same time?
Yes, the circumcision and the being buried with him in baptism.
Oh, okay, all right.
And so those two are. That's what
circumcision of the heart occurs with baptism.
I wouldn't say it has to be circumcision of the heart. like some people say that, but that's, they'd be like, oh, look, Romans, Romans
What are
2.
the two things happening in that verse at the same time? When you get baptized in water, what's happening concomitantly?
That you receive this circumcision that he's talking about in verse 11.
Which is,
I wrote some notes on this.
Just read the verse.
Ouch.
Oh, in verse 11, it says, and you were circumcised with a circumcision made without hands. So it's
keep going.
In the removal of the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the circumcision made without hands would be the removal of our flesh, like the fleshly nature.
Right.
That's how I would read it. I'm going to be corrected.
There's something about, I think, tied up in a federal headship in that Christ represented us. We're crucified with him, and we died with him, and the covenant promise. I think the only way to kind of get through all of this and make any sense is with the covenantal aspect, with covenantal theology. You can't do it dispensationally. You'll just come short. I think the Presbyterians, well, the Reformed, Presbyterian, whatever, and a lot of the Lutheran groups have some good insight on it. The one who would really be the best, I think, might be Meredith Kline. Meredith Kline. It'd be great that all of us who are interested in this go sit in a class and go, can we ask questions? And this guy, go here, and he would. The guy is amazing. But he will lead you. I can tell you, he'll lead you in a way you wouldn't think. He knows his topic so well. I think in order to understand what it is in the New Testament, we have to understand what it is in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just rambling, but
No,
that's great.
I think that's true. Like we have to. Not only do we have to read the Old Testament with New Testament eyes, but we have to read it with New Testament eyes of what the New Testament believers would have been seeing the Old Testament as. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I think that's, and not take a shot at anybody, but that's one of the reasons I believe in infant baptism, because of the covenant faithfulness aspect, because the infants were included in covenant by circumcision. And a Jew then who's got saved would never say, oh, now that I see the Messiah is here, the covenant faithfulness of God to our children is now done. I don't see that as being an actuality, because there's too much Old Testament continuation interpreted and clarified in the New Testament context of the blood of Christ. But it's one of the reasons I have for it.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
And I could see why you would say that. I think the Old Testament obviously wasn't as clear into the new shed light on a lot of those Old Testament passages that speaks about the coming of the new, but I think it does definitely show us that there's a change there, whereas in the old it was made up of unregenerate and regenerate believers, whereas in the new there's only regenerate believers. And I know there's a distinction made between Presbyterians, and obviously I'm talking about real I'll say it, real Presbyterians, the faithful Presbyterians. That may rustle some people, but it's true. My brothers in the Lord, I'll just say the faithful ones that are holding true. But anyway, I know that they're not saying this is an exact one-for-one description. I'm not saying that, I'm mischaracterize them, but there is a lot of parallels. And I think there's some things to be learned by interacting with that. Like you said, I think we can definitely learn from Meredith Kline for sure about a lot of topics. But I do see that interpreting the old, and this is something too that Meredith Kline, I believe, was one of the first Presbyterians that said this. I might be wrong. But and he kind of, I don't want to say an odd duck, but in the sense that stands out, it says that we can interpret the old in light of the new, which a lot of Presbyterians do not, in the whole one covenant of grace, but different two administration model. Yeah, so he's a little.
Well, I
different in
enjoyed
that
sitting under
respect.
him and listening and learning, and but it's one thing. One of the things I learned was anybody who says basically, "Yeah, I understand covenant theology completely," is self-deceived.
Right. Yeah.
Not that you can't get a good grasp, but if each one of us covenanted, so to speak, to study covenant for 1 month, and then we didn't talk about it until we came back a month later and talked, we would all have a lot of similar things, but we all would have learned some different things as well, which have been mutually enlightening. And
Right.
would we change anybody's views? Not that that's an intention. It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Oh yeah, it is. I don't want to say or seem like I'm saying it's not. I hope you didn't.
Right. Oh no, not at all. I'm just saying, wow, it's a tough one.
Oh, it is,
Yeah.
and my main thing is, of course, is that we see, or at least what I try to tell other people is that we see each other as brothers in the new covenant, and I think you do the same.
Yep. Well, of course, except for Josh sometimes.
Oh wow! Because I made that comment about his.
It's what it is. I just was taking a friendly, loving jab.
You're gonna take that?
Look, I love you, man. I love you. All right. I'm just being. All right, just being nice on you.
Well,
it was getting too nice here.
Right.
You got to make it more antagonistic.
We needed to throw some punches, right?
Oh, and I have a comment, by the way. So when you guys read Colossians 2:11 and 12, do you see circumcision of the heart there? Because my impression was always that circumcision of the heart was regeneration. And so, well, first of all, it doesn't say the heart circumcised, but in Colossians 2. But do you guys? That's just a general starting question. Like, do you guys see that?
That's a good question. Now that you asked that question like that, it just occurred to me: circumcision didn't save the people in the Old Testament.
Right. And I have some comments on here. I said on this text, I said when it says you're circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, what this appears to be saying is that you're circumcised with like a circumcision, as there are more than one definite article is absent in the Greek, not placed in the flesh or performed outwardly, as is the literal meaning / nature of circumcision. And this one that he's talking about in Colossians 2:11 is figurative and or spiritual. Is it a one for one? It could be, but it doesn't. I don't think it says enough to make that point.
Right. Well, when I talk about that in my support of infant baptism, what I'll do is I'll quote that and I'll say Paul relates them together, but I don't say how or what that relationship is. But there is a relationship. And then I'll say, but it's not explicitly taught in Scripture. You don't agree? That's okay, because it's highly debatable. But there is a relationship. What the heck is it?
Right, and that's undeniable by this verse. There is a relationship between circumcision and baptism in Colossians 2:11.
When I read this, and I can't remember where it is when Jesus was teaching this. But he was teaching on, or maybe it was Paul. They're teaching on the seed.
On what?
And on the seed, and how when you bury something, maybe this is the same place, but when you bury something, the thing that comes up isn't the dead seed, right? It's
Romans 15.
That might be.
Yeah.
And I read this Colossians, and I'm thinking, all right, it's the removal of the body of the flesh, and then raised. Then God raised him from the dead, and it says in 12, you were also raised up with him through faith. And so, like the dead had to be removed, kind of like with the seed. I don't know if he's alluding to that or not.
Maybe. Oh man, I have to go back. So it's a seed. You said a seed. You said buried with a seed is buried, or?
Hold on, I'm looking at my cross references right now.
Because the one thing that's important to keep in mind is that enhokai in the Greek is used several times in this passage. So when it says in which you're also raised, that same phrase that says in which you were also, or in which also, is also in the very beginning of Colossians 2:11, when it says enhokai man, that's a long word. I won't even try to pronounce that. But like,
It's in there.
It's a or paste it in there.
Yeah, I like to look at big Greek words.
Oh god.
Which
yeah,
one?
No, Matt can definitely with.
What's the verse?
Colossians 2:11.
Okay.
And while you're looking that up, Matt, well, you weren't done. CK, go ahead.
No. Oh, sorry. I want to post. I'll post the Greek itself in there. Here we go. Yeah, that's a monster of a word.
Because Matt had a good point about this verse in Colossians, and something I want to agree with him. I don't think that we can neglect our union with Christ when we look at this verse and others. Whether we disagree as Baptists, that we look at the whole deal with circumcision. We still can't neglect our union with Christ. That's very important.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't do it. I think that's where we agree with our Presbyterian brothers, is that we are united with Christ, and that we're united in death, burial, and resurrection.
Yeah. Right. And
so how we get there is going to be a little different, right? And the significance we see in the old and under the Mosaic covenant, but
well, especially you being NCT.
Well, according to Justin, I'm a Federalist. So.
Oh yeah, come on over, man. Come on over.
Which to some that's NCT light. So.
Oh yeah, right. It's the real.
Look at Matt's face. That's so funny.
And NCT is that's like theology light.
No,
I love you.
That's a straw man. I've been too nice to you. I'm just gonna say what Matt does sometimes. I think I might have to start picking on you more.
NCT is synergism.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, come on, Matt. That's not true. It's not synergism.
No, Matt.
You have to keep the covenant bounds. Keep the covenant bounds.
You got it wrong. NCT is antinomianism.
I agree with Matt's his own point.
Yeah, now we got general, so we won.
NCT, to be fair, for one is Calvinistic. So if we're talking about,
I don't know about Calvinism, where you have to keep covenant bounds in order to stay covenantally faithful with God, so you can keep your salvation. I don't see that
no
being...
NCT person I know says that. You'd have to.
They don't say it like that. When I was reading it, covenant bounds. I got it wrong, but it was like, what? Yeah. And I'm not the only one who was saying this sounds heretical.
Yeah, I would have to say you'd have to show me. I'm not saying other people might not misrepresent it, but I've never read anybody that says that. They say the exact opposite.
Maybe I misread it.
These are former Presbyterians and Reformed Baptists, so that are went to Westminster and other seminaries that hold to the same soteriology as any of us. So
maybe I just didn't read it right, or they finally grew up and matured and said something proper. I don't know.
Yeah, have you heard of Thomas Schreiner?
Isn't he a cultist? No, I don't know who he is.
No,
I'm kidding.
He's written Baker Exegesis on Romans.
Yeah, thank you, Han.
Oh man.
Yeah, he's written one of the foremost commentary on Romans in our.
Yeah, I've never heard of the guy.
Yeah, Chris, you've never heard of him. Yeah, he's only one of your professors.
You heard him now.
Yeah, he's definitely not a synergist, wouldn't you say, Chris and Robert?
No, he is.
No, he's a Calvinist.
Yeah, he's a Calvinist, right? So
he's actually one of my favorite on Romans. He trolls a lot.
If anybody wants to, I'm putting the transliteration of that word that I put in there. Yeah, Matt, you got it? The pronunciation of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd like
to depends on if you're using
I'm not
the goofy Erasmus.
Yeah,
or
I don't
if you're using reconstructed Koine.
I don't want to be a Roman Catholic with my pronunciation, so I want to get away from Erasmus's pronunciations of words. But
that's word circumcision, right?
Yeah. Or that was to circumcise. Yeah, circumcision.
So notice the word. It's interesting because I did it phonetically, so you guys could, parat mesete, but parat, perimeter, goes around.
Yeah.
Hair comes around. You know, it's just I love to see that kind of stuff in there.
It's also a bird that can talk.
And what's this word in Greek? Right there, I'm typing it in.
Pearls. I don't remember.
I
I
don't
have to go to Matthew chapter 7 to go and look at it. Margarita. You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding.
Way. Margarita?
Margarita.
Oh,
So margaritas are biblical.
Wow.
There you
Wow.
go.
Okay, sorry, I just had to waste you guys' time. You guys are doing so great and spiritual, and here, hey, guess what?
No.
Hey, someone had to bring some sort of flavor to it.
One thing.
Right?
One thing I want to, and let me just pull up the notes here. I want to ask the Apostle Paul about this. In verse 11, I want to ask him, like, Paul, how is this circumcision made without hands? Like when he says by the putting off of the body of the flesh. That's how he explains it, but how is this? And he answers it in that. But then I read Douglas Moo's commentary on this verse, and one of the possible interpretations that he said was referring to Christ, that by putting off the body of the flesh, it's referring to Christ in that he gave his flesh to be crucified in his circumcision death. And that's, I think, Michael Horton holds that as well. But the only other time that the word the phrase body of flesh is used is in the previous chapter in Colossians. And that is of Christ. So that could be of him, of Jesus Christ, giving his flesh to be crucified. So like that's,
I got a thought. I don't know if it's a good thought or not, but when I think about this stuff, and I think we're crucified with Christ, something in the back of my head says, well, what about the future? If you go to Romans 8:29-30, those who be foreknew, he also predestined. He elected, he justified, he glorified. And